coming back to masculinity, is masculinity toxic? What do you think?
I think at the end of the day, it's just like anything else, right? Like, it's just like food. If you eat it in small amounts, in the correct amounts, in a balanced amount, it's healthy. It's good for you. But when anything...
What if the food itself, that particular food element is already toxic to begin with?
Right. So actually, on that note, I just saw this quote. It's by this Greek philosopher. I can't remember his name, but he said something about poison. The dose is the poison.
Yeah.
So enough of anything can kill you, but even a small amount of something which could be poisonous could be quite useful.
Yep.
Right. So the dose. So I think the answer, I guess my contribution at this point, right, to Parkson's point is that for masculinity, it could be useful, but how much?
Yeah.
You know, and can you even measure, right? How far do you push it, right? Yeah.
Or how do you balance it out with feminine traits at the end of the day, right? Like, is it context appropriate to be masculine? You know, that sort of question. So there's no, it's not a black and white thing where is it toxic or is it not toxic, but rather it's like the expression of it. It's the expression of it toxic in that sense.
And we also can't escape the first question which we asked, like, are these terms still relevant, right? And the more we say masculinity, right, we kind of entrenching certain things. Maybe that's it. Right?
No, not necessarily, but I think it is still useful to have the term as a form of taxonomy, you know, to help you classify these traits. So if you don't have the taxonomy, then these things get rather chaotic and there's no way to have a good understanding. Of course, ideally, you want to create a better taxonomy that defines it, but it doesn't exist yet. So we have to rely on this. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean we're trenching it. But going back to what Mervin was saying, right? It's like some parts of masculinity are traditional masculinity is toxic, right? This idea that we are always going to be superior to women and therefore we should subjugate them, for example.
Is that really masculinity or is there some kind of power tripping going on?
It's power tripping, but it's also seen as it is an aspect of masculinity.
But now we're seeing it in feminism. Now we are seeing it in radical feminism where women say they're stronger and better and more powerful than men, and
right. And that is something that I would agree.
So is
similarly
masculine,
toxic.
Then is it masculine?
So we're tripping on the definition. No,
we're not tripping on the definition, but I'm saying that particular aspect of it, right? That particular aspect, if we can at least say that such a thing does exist. Oh, really? It does exist.
One definition of masculinity includes this.
But I'm not saying that all masculinity is toxic. I'm just saying that there are certain aspects that are definitely toxic. I don't think it's necessarily just about the dose. I'm saying that there are certain aspects of it that are definitely toxic.
Well, what are we talking about right now? Specifically about the power thing, is it? About the power dynamics?
No. Going back to what you were saying, right? You were saying that in different doses, in moderation is okay. But what I'm saying is, regardless of the dosage, there are certain aspects of it that are definitely toxic.
Yeah, but I'm asking you, which aspect are you talking about?
That's one example. The whole idea that somehow it's okay for us to treat women badly, for example.
But where does that come from?
Yeah, so that comes from that. So again, go back to what I said at the very, very beginning of this, right? It's something that we inherit from the past. In certain cultures, patriarchal cultures in particular.
What I meant is that what function does it serve when we think that we're more superior than women, that we have to oppress them? You know, it's like
it doesn't serve any function than to satisfy one's ego, if you ask me.
So maybe the oppression is the extreme end of the spectrum, but on the other, I guess the more benign side, there's a sense that you're not oppressing, but you're caring. Right? So you take charge because you, for whatever reason, you feel you want to take care. And you may believe that they're the fairer sex. And this is an inherited belief, right? But you push that too far, then it becomes oppressive, that they're useless, they can't do anything.
And that's the point that I'm trying to raise. Thanks, Ruhuan. Thanks. That's what I'm saying is about extremes. It's about extremes. Like so the trait itself, protectiveness is okay. We want, as men, we want to protect our family. We want to make sure our kids are good. But when it becomes too extreme, right, that we have to oppress them. Listen to me, I'm your father. I know what I'm talking about. Listen to me, I'm your husband. Woman, shut up. Go to the kitchen. Then you see, so by itself, the trait is not inherently toxic. It came from a space that was good. But when taken to the extreme, like, when it becomes overly aggressive and all that, then it becomes toxic, it becomes problematic. That's the point I'm trying to raise. Nothing. Okay. I don't think anything itself is...
I read you.
Yeah, it's not... Okay, never mind. Sorry.
No. Again, sorry to interrupt, but this thing came to mind, and it comes back to what Parkson asked about what's the role of masculinity. To me, it kind of just helps clarify and simplify the conversation by kind of outlining the map of what we're talking about. right? Otherwise, anything can be everything to anyone. So the issue here, okay, so even the mild aspect of taking care, protectiveness, some people have issue with this. I cannot take care of myself. Why must you step in? But if you're going to go down this route, then everything's going to be offensive to someone. So how are we going to have this conversation? So we accept that this protectiveness can be masculine. That's our starting point, right? Then at least you can have a conversation about extremes. Otherwise, everything could be offensive to someone. Then we won't be able to have a conversation. I think a large part of the challenge we face right now in talking about these contentious things is that everything's offensive to everyone. And we tend to just go towards people who buy into what we believe are echo chambers. And we talk separately. Sorry?
Virtual tribalism.
Yeah, tribalism, absolutely, right? And then we don't have a conversation. Then we have all these little tribes around. And then you enter the teenager on social media, like, which tribe do I belong? So it becomes doubly confusing. So I think to me, masculinity does have a use as a starting point. Right, to kind of organize what exactly we're talking about. And we can even say, like, traditionally, this is how it was. And we can moderate based on our relationship in every family. And I think that other important thing is we're talking about father and son, right? Or father and children. That's a personal relationship with you and your children. You have to come to some kind of contract and agreement or compact what works for you. And this is informed by your own worldview, religion, so on and so forth. It's very difficult to say there's a universal model, right? About what works. But I think, if we don't have these kind of yardsticks or kind of like rough compartments, how are we going to start this conversation?
Talking about the protective quality or trait, I think both men and women have it, right? Women tend to express it when they become mothers. They are protective of their offspring, their children. For men, they will protect the women and children in that sense. So I think that is an order, right? And I think society needs certain order. Family, society, and the larger whole. It's good to have certain order, and when you don't have that order, then that's chaos, all right? I think for women to say, I can take care of myself, yes, I agree, all right? But when you become a mother, your focus will be on the children. I think you would like to have somebody watching over you and protecting you and taking care of you. So I think in that sense, when you look at society as a whole, there's order and everything is in harmony. Talking about the aggressive nature, right? Aggression, for example, it's often associated with masculinity, but women can be equally aggressive. Statistics in the US, for example, about intimate partner violence, it's 50-50 between men and women. All right, except that men are more physically violent. Women, I think they use the passive aggressive method. Okay, because men are physically stronger. All right. But there are also studies that show why men, carry out physical violence or all kinds of abuse towards women. Most of the time, it is when they feel that their masculinity is being threatened. For example, when their wife says, no, you're not good enough, you're not, this and that, then that's where their identity is threatened. And that's where, I guess, self-preservation or overcompensation, whatever you want to call it, takes over.
Which is terrible,
think,
right? Which is terrible because that shouldn't be which is something that shouldn't really happen.
It shouldn't happen. Yes.
The
so what is the cause of
justify?
I feel So you asked the question, what's the cause of this? And to me, I think it's a more universal, and this cuts across all genders, right? All sexes, of like who you are, your sense of self-worth, self-esteem. Because if you say I'm not man enough, right? Or you feel you're not man enough, because then what this tells me is that your definition of your self-worth is based on these masculine traits. And maybe you inherited that, society told that to you, or your family told you this, but have you been introspective enough to actually reflect on what your self-worth really is? What is it based on? Is it necessarily based on these defined traits, or is it more complicated? And a lot of times we don't know, and this is a separate conversation about mental wellness and well-being. Sense of self-purpose, values, mindset, who you are, all this is very important. And I personally believe everything else flows from that.
But I think, if you ask me from a psychotherapist's point of view about such a scenario, it's really about, there's no deeper order thinking. It's a very emotionally charged situation. So, we will revert to our baseline and be very...
we become animals.
Yeah, we become essentially like animals in a sense. But not that. Also, it's like, how are men conditioned to deal with difficult situations is violence because, you know, in fact, we were talking about this yesterday, right? When do you first realize you're a man? Generally, is when your parents tell you, hey, boys don't cry. 男子汉大丈夫，流血不流泪.
Yeah, so we're conditioned, right?
Yeah, so that's why we're
But that's not
conditioned.
based on anything, right? It's conditions based on this cultural norm, supposedly, right?
So
And we've
men
not
will,
reflected about that.
so men will resort to violence because we have been taught that anger and violence are the only acceptable forms of expression from a very young age, you know. So we can't break this down to gender differences. This is actually social conditioning already.
No, absolutely.
Right. Inherited constructs, right? Inherited constructs.
So
but is there a biological aspect to it? I don't know. I don't remember.
No, I don't think so.
I think to a certain extent, maybe testosterone. So we tend to
that's
be more aggressive, more risk-taking, you know, more reactive to a certain degree. I mean, as hunter-gatherers, right? Men are hunters. We need to deal with like tigers, lions, bears, oh my, and so we need to like make snap decisions, maybe. I'm not saying this, I mean, this is probably biological, which I'm not an expert on biological psychology, but what I'm saying is that I have spoken to violent men. I have attended groups of violent men, and many of times they agree that it's a social construct, it's social conditioning that led them to where they were based on, you know, what they see at home. Maybe dad was violent towards mom. Based on the friends they hang out with, maybe they hang out in gangs and all that, and violence was the answer to everything. And you watch movies, you know, you watch TV. Well, how do we deal with problems in movie and TV? Not everyone's a MacGyver, right? Most of the time we shoot guns or we beat up the bad guys. So then it becomes a conditioned response in an argument when we are being threatened. And our brain cannot tell the difference between a real physical threat and an emotional threat. Today, everything's a threat. Right, and so then we lash out. So, but what you're saying is that we should be able to think deeper. But any person in a situation like that will not be able to think that deep
because it's
not at the moment.
No, because it's an automatic thought which has been programmed. Right now, okay. I mean, this is an interesting thought experiment. If you had like a child who was conditioned otherwise, right? Because we established there's no biological basis of this. But if you had a child who understood, like, you know, feelings, negative feelings, and how to express them healthily, maybe wouldn't resort to violence. Maybe. But then maybe we'll describe that as being feminine, which is a separate issue. Right?
So I maybe wouldn't describe it as feminine. I would say that he's becoming a human.
No, exactly. So this is what I guess more enlightened or, you know, holistic people see. But some people be, you know, talk about feelings because you're kunyao. Right? I'm sure we don't believe in this. But this is very much the inherited stereotype.
And in fact, that's the inherited toxicity that exists in masculinity today, which makes the discourse so difficult because so just now we were talking about how there are a group of women who view men as a problem and all that, right? But similarly, we also have this group of men who think that boys don't cry. Objectification and violence towards women is acceptable. And this is the toxic aspect of masculinity. It does exist. We can't ignore it.
No, I think the masculinity is not toxic. It is when there's an imbalance, you know, just like a diet, right? If you have an imbalanced diet, it's not healthy. Okay. And that's why I tell people, if your diet has a name, it's probably unhealthy. Okay. So we need to understand food. We need to understand the macronutrients and micronutrients and what it does to your body when you eat them, right? And then you decide what you want to eat more of and what you want to eat less of, okay? And so same thing, you know, for example, the weather, right? Whether you have hot days, you have cold days, it has to do with atmospheric pressure, it has to do with humidity, temperature, and a lot of factors that actually produce. So thunderstorms, you know, hurricanes, okay, only certain conditions that exist, you have a thunderstorm or hurricane. Certain conditions exist, you have a rainbow. Okay. So I think masculinity itself is neutral. All right. It is the attitude and the influence and maybe the pressure from certain people or peer pressure or even family and all that makes it, you know. And so a very well-known guy, Warren Farrell, who wrote the book, The Boy Crisis. I think all of us should read it. And his most famous quote, he has many good quotes in that book, but the most famous one is, boys who hurt others. All right. And he's talking about, you know, like school shooters, all right? Teenage school shooters. Why are they so angry? Why are they so, you know, full of anger and all that? Well, because they are hurting inside. So it's nothing to do with the masculinity.